Ms. Zahid.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is for Mr. Parker. I was very surprised to learn that no firm service level agreements were included as part of your relationship with partner departments, just not specific business agreements. Like, I'm really surprised. Like, no private sector company would sign a contract with an IT service provider without firm service level agreements. So, if you have some comments on that.
Absolutely. When Shared Services Canada was stood up, it inherited a vast array of different types, different qualities of IT services infrastructure. In most cases, there were no existing service level agreements that came with that IT infrastructure. So it's been a big job just to figure out what is the IT infrastructure that was inherited, what's the map to it, and we're well on the way to completing that, and it's necessary in order to consolidate the networks, the data centers, for example. We are going to be establishing service level expectations for our clients. You can see in the report on plans and priorities for 16-17 that we are shifting to a truly business model for Shared Services Canada. We are setting targets. For example, around the reliability and stability of the desktop functions, the percent of time that email systems are available, the number of applications migrated, the time that the mission-critical systems are available, the mean time to restore those systems. So all of those indicators are being developed, and it's our intent to hold ourselves to account to those targets that we will set for our clients. We're also intent on measuring customer satisfaction. The Auditor General mentioned this, and that's an important feedback mechanism as well for us to understand how we're doing. And we've done the first survey, got the results, and that's a baseline for us to grow the organization in terms of its maturity.
But will there be some penalties? Because without penalty or consequence for failure, service level agreements are meaningless. So will you build a penalty or some consequence for failing to achieve the service level agreements into your new program? And what could that penalty be?
All right. I'm going to ask Mr. Kulaki to take that question on.
All right, thank you. First of all, I have to say it's a privilege to be here. Mr. Chair, this is quite typical in this industry, this managed service provider industry, that when you go into an engagement such as this, you take on the existing status. And the agreements are quite standard to come in and say, the phrase is your mess for less, but basically you run it at the same status. If there were pre-existing measurements, you take on those measurements and you agree to run it at the same status. What we had here in many cases, there were not sufficient systems in place doing the operational metrics that we could take on and say, okay, now we have a baseline, we will continue to measure against that baseline. So absent that baseline, it becomes a best effort kind of engagement. To your question about service credits, if you will, we intend to, this sort of goes back to some of the previous questions about how things are paid for. We are trying to migrate from what we were created as, because some base had to be established with the appropriations, but as we move forward, we're going into what we call a fee-for-service environment. And so as demand goes up, additional services are always added. That's just the law of nature. We will have agreements in place that say, here's the level we will provide, here's the availabilities, the reliabilities, et cetera. Because we're all in the government, it is not typical to say we're going to provide some sort of service credit if we miss the mark. Now, the caveat to that is we inherited a hybrid environment where we do go to industry for a certain amount of our services. It's predictable we will continue to do some services ourselves. Some it will make perfect business sense to have industry doing those. The benefit we get with industry is we ensure we have service credits through them. So the email example, for instance, we do have service credits, and those are piling up, and we have a very careful count of those. And as we unfold the operation, we will apply those as necessary.
Would